This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
So now then, it's time for our speaker for tonight. William Harris, MD, a vegan for more than 44 years, is a founding and current director of the Vegetarian Society. Prior to his retirement, he was an emergency physician and the director of the Kaiser Permanente Vegetarian Lifestyle Clinic. He received his medical degree from the University of California, San Francisco, and is the author of the book, The Scientific Basis of Vegetarianism. Tonight he will present In Search of the Optimal Diet. Please welcome Dr. William Harris.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. I'm going to run through our usual beginning routine. You've probably all heard it 1,000 times before, but there may be a few people here who haven't. We're the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. This is our official shirt here. You can buy it online. You can also look at all of our former newsletters all the way back to 1990. And we have about 70 online speakers from our previous meetings. Some of them are truly expert in their field. Fast internet connection, I recommend that you go there and see what we have. I also have a website of my own. It's at vegsource.com. You can read my book there. You can download it as a PDF file, and you can also download something that's very useful if you happen to be of a nutritional bent. With the assistance of Jim Thompson here in the front row, we downloaded and converted the entire USDA SR21 nutrient database into an Excel spreadsheet. And it's got 12 sheets, all kinds of information here, and all you have to do is know how to run Excel. Well, I have some ideal but highly impractical advice for all of you. The first piece of impractical advice is, if man made it, don't eat it. Anybody remember this guy, David Kessler? He was the FDA honcho who was installed at the same time that the nutrition facts labels came out. And the nutrition fact labels are more appropriately called the nutrition lies label, because nobody's ever been able to figure them out in the first place. But anyway, David has changed his leaf, and he's now come out with a book called How the Food Makers Captured Our Brains. And the way they did it, they use fat, sugar, and salt, three of the most addictive substances in the human diet, and they have created these little fiefdoms of fast food outfits that have managed to addict everybody in the country. If there's anybody here who grew up as a vegetarian, you may be free, but for all the rest of us, we grew up eating stuff that was way too greasy, way too salty, and way too sugary, even if we're eating a reasonably decent diet. This is the nutrient analysis on a Big Mac attack. The red arrow here is the RDA arrow. You're going to be seeing a lot of this, so try to get the general idea. If you ate nothing but this fast food for your entire day's calories, and that would mean you'd have to go back to the store several times probably, everything to the left of this arrow would be on the shorts, and that would include alpha-tocopherol, vitamin A, magnesium, riboflavin, pyridoxine, zinc, vitamin C, dietary fiber, folate, and you just barely make it on iron, in spite of the fact there's a hamburger sitting right in the middle of this, and that's supposed to be a good source of iron. Now, everything on the right you've got enough of, but the fact is that you are short on all these other substances, so you're going to have to keep on eating, and that means you're going to wind up weighing more than you want to. This is the CEO of this fast food outfit, and he knows there's something wrong with what he's doing, but if he makes any changes and the profit margins go down the next quarter, he's going to be out on the street looking for another job. And that's why the food industry is your worst enemy. Here's an example of a pretzel label: hydrogenated vegetable oil, that's fat, sugar down here, salt down here, and all the rest of this stuff is put in here just for the profit of the food industry, because it increases the shelf life of whatever product they've got. Here's the next piece of highly impractical advice. If it doesn't have any fiber in it, don't eat it. The reason for that is fiber is not really a nutrient, but it's a very good marker for good food. If there's no fiber in it, it's either animal food or it's highly refined plant food like sugar or vegetable oil. You don't need either of those. You can eat any of these plant foods, including avocados and nuts and seeds, which are pretty high in fat, but they also have a lot of fiber. Grams of fiber. The fruits lead the pack. Vegetables come in next. These, incidentally, are the number of fruits and vegetables in each category. There are 97 vegetables, 59 fruits, and just one avocado. The deal with fiber is that it's cellulose. We are unable to digest cellulose. Cellulose is just a long chain, sheet-like polymer of glucose. And if we had cellulase, which is needed to break down cellulose, we could just go out and eat the trees. But that would mean that there would very shortly be no trees, and there'd be even more people than we have. On the other hand, starch is also a long chain polymer of glucose, but it's got a frond-like structure. And you can sneak your amylase in between these fronds, and they can break up the starch into glucose, and then you can use that. The sheet-like structure of the cellulose does not permit the cellulase to get in between. So fiber is a nutritional traffic cop. It shortens intestinal transit time, retards the intestinal absorption of both nutrients and adverse substances like cholesterol, pesticides, and hormones. A vegan diet causes weight loss. Why? Because vegans have to eat about 1/3 more food than omnivores in order to meet their calorie needs. So what happens on a vegan diet is you fill your stomach, and all the stretch receptors start sending signals up to your brain saying you've had enough, and you meet your nutrient requirements before you've met your calorie requirements. So you take the calories out of your fat stores, and on a vegan diet you can lose about 1 pound a week, which doesn't sound like much. You can do better with Atkins, but remember, that's 52 pounds in a year. Here's a nice illustration of how this works by Joel Furman, one of our previous MD speakers. Here's a stomach that's all full of healthy vegetables. The stomach is completely filled. There's only 400 calories. This is what your stomach looks with 400 calories of chicken. And here's what it looks like with 400 calories of oil. So obviously, here are two stomachs that are going to demand more food be sent down. Now, in my opinion, the prime determinants of health are not pills and not surgical procedures. It's simply a vegan diet and exercise. I don't regard exercise as negotiable. I think the only excuse for not exercising every day is a death certificate at least 24 hours old. The exercise should be done daily. It should be enough to raise your pulse, your respiration, blood pressure, make you break a sweat. And you ought to pick 3 of them, because if you just stick with running, sooner or later you're going to get an overuse injury. Running is probably the best of all of these, but you'll break down sooner or later. So then you go to swimming or bike riding. I think some calisthenics are a good idea. I live in a condominium and I run up 34 flights of stairs every day. And be sure you go up the stairs, because if you go down the stairs, Sir Isaac Newton is doing all the work. If you go up the stairs, you're doing the work. And furthermore, if you go down the stairs, the only muscles that get worked out are the quadriceps on the front of your thigh, whereas the part that usually requires a little excess work is the glutes, and you get them nicely when you go upstairs. Now, I have slightly different exercise habits here. I'm a gymnast, and this is pretty good upper body exercise. It's a rope climb. This is at the McCully Recreation Center before my big sport is acrobatic trampoline, which is this. And I try to do that a couple of times a week still. And nothing organizes the mind quite as much as jumping out of an airplane at 14,000 feet and falling at 140 miles an hour. So I'm a skydiver also. This was a skydive from April. And this is what the landing looks like from my camera, which is on the top of my helmet. And this is what the landing looks like from the ground. That was a hook turn, and most of the time I managed to stand up sort of like that. Once in a while it's not quite as classy. And that's that. Now, thank you. The reason that a vegan diet works is that all of the essential dietary minerals were synthesized by nuclear fusion reactions that took place in stars that blew up at least 5 billion years ago. And all of the essential organic nutrients required in the human diet are synthesized only by plants and microorganisms. None of them are synthesized by animals. And they all begin with the photosynthesis of glucose. Believe it or not, all the life on this planet is dependent on photosynthesis. The green plant leaf takes radiation from the sun, and it takes all of these inorganic nutrients out of the environment, and it makes glucose first. And then from glucose, it makes all of the essential amino acids, the 2 essential fatty acids, and all of the true vitamins, plus all of the phytonutrients, which are mostly antioxidants, and most of them are things we're just starting to learn about. So there is a quadruple whammy in animal foods. Number one, all the essential nutrients are secondhand. None of the things you need were made by the animal. The unique ingredients, such as cholesterol, saturated fat, and slivers of protein that may cause autoimmune reactions, those are the only things that are unique to animals, and the animal food contains no protective phytonutrients, and worst of all, the animal food displaces from your diet the plant foods that do. Protein amino acids, these are the essential ones over on this side. There's about 10 of them. They have an average of about 5.9 enzymes required for synthesis. So the plants do all that heavy carrying, and we make our own non-essential ones. So all the animals make the non-essential aminos because they only take about 1.5 enzymes to put together. I've sort of given special attention here to aspartic acid and glutamic acid because they have some unpleasant habits when they're in the free form, but in natural protein, naturally existing protein, they don't cause any trouble at all. All of the true vitamins are made only by plants and microorganisms. Special case here, vitamin B12. You cannot get that from plant food. It has to be added from a bacterial source. Recipes. Most of the recipes I'm going to give you up are online at Getting Started on our BSH.org website. And I'm showing recipes not because I'm a great chef, but because somebody suggested to Alita that we're really long on theory and why you can be a vegan and why you should be, but we never tell you how to do it. So I'm going to try to do it in a manner that is simple enough that even I can understand it. And here's a really complicated recipe. This is called a salad. And it consists of tomatoes and some cucumbers and some green leafy stuff all mixed up. And here's the RDA arrow, and if you ate nothing but salad all day, you'd be very full, for one thing, but also you'd meet the RDA for everything except this one thing, B12. And you could solve that very easily by taking some Red Star Nutritional yeast and mixing it in with whatever sort of low-fat dressing you're going to put on the salad. Now here's the horrible example of what not to eat. And I don't want anybody to start salivating looking at this, but this is a Betty Crocker sour cream chocolate cake. And after you finish eating this, you've put all this stuff down. Here's the RDA arrow, and everything to the left of this is on the shorts. The only thing you've got enough of is phosphorus, and you're definitely going to have to eat more to make up for all the nutrient shortfalls that you're getting from eating this cake. So this is not a great nutritional bargain, except for the Pillsbury people. Okay, here's one of my favorite recipes. This is a vegetable smoothie. It's up online at our website. You take a lot of green stuff and a tomato and some carrot and some seeds of various kinds, some flaxseed, a little bit of balsamic vinegar and some onion and some garlic to flavor it up a little bit. Run it into a blender. It comes out looking like this. This is all the stuff that's in it. It meets the RDA for everything because it's got Red Star. There's another of my favorite recipes, absolutely my favorite. This is a fruit smoothie. This is made with strawberries, frozen orange juice. That's cheating. If I really wanted to lug orange crates around on my back, I'd use fresh oranges, but this is so much easier. And it's got seeds and Red Star, and so it meets the RDA for everything. Everything to the right of the RDA arrow is in great supply. Now, why do I use a blender? How many people have blenders, by the way? Now, the math of the whole thing is, suppose we have a roughly spherical macadamia nut, and we break it down into 1,000 equal, identical macadamia nuts that are smaller. Okay, well, if you do the math, the volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. The area of a sphere is 4 pi r squared. So it turns out that after you fiddle with all this stuff over here, the surface area goes up as the cube root of the number of particles that you've broken it into. So if you start with 1,000 particles, the area has gone up 10 times. If you do 1,000,000 particles, it's gone up 100 times. If you break it into 1,000,000,000,000 particles, it's 10,000 times. So what? So what? What does it matter how much you've broken the particles down? Any guesses? You got to digest this stuff with something, and you have digestive enzymes in your GI tract, and they can't get at what's on the inside of this macadamia nut. They can only get at what's on the surface. So there's no point in swallowing a macadamia nut whole because you won't be able to get any nutritional value out of it. However, if you break it down into 1,000,000,000,000 particles, you've got 10,000 times as much surface area for those enzymes to work on. So breaking the food down into really tiny chunks increases your digestive efficiency. Now, this is a guy named Horace Fletcher. He's regarded as a health food fattest of the Victorian era. And he was called the Great Masticator because he said that you should chew food 32 times for each morsel and don't swallow it until it's liquid. And he said, nature will castigate those who do not masticate. Now, I have no objection. If you have the time and a good dental program, I would advise you to do this rather than using the blender. But the problem is I'm kind of lazy and I tend to eat everything on the go, so I do it with a blender. But I will admit that it's best to chew and salivate your food thoroughly. If you ever go to a steak restaurant, you'll see the first thing that happens is that the steak eater takes the parsley and puts it on somebody else's plate. You ever notice that? And if he's presented with a whole bunch of parsley, which is 100 grams of parsley, he would probably run out of the room screaming, because there's no way you can eat a whole bunch of parsley. Well, it turns out the parsley is the best source of iron in the entire USDA database. The highest source of animal iron is pork liver. This is on a calorie basis. So parsley is pretty good stuff, and you can eat a whole bunch. Here's a whole bunch of parsley and a tomato and some carrots and some celery down here to give a little bit of sodium, and a teaspoon of Red Star yeast. And here's the nutrient value up here. The RDA arrow is to the left of all the nutrients, which means that the nutrients are to the right of the arrow, and that means you've met the RDA for everything. And you could see how nutritious this was if it weren't for the fact that it's got so darn much vitamin A that you can't see what the value of these other nutrients is. Now, if you can't afford a juicer, go down and get a bottle of low salt V8 juice and put a little Red Star in it, and you will get basically the same effect. Now, here's a complicated recipe. You take peanut butter, parsley flakes, some Red Star yeast, and mix it together in a blender, and it meets the RDA for everything. This is a slightly different graph than what I've been showing you. I got lazy and started doing them directly from Nutritionist 4. But if you got 100% of your day's kilocalories from just this stuff, you would meet 100% of the kilocalories, 231% of the protein, dietary fiber 192, vitamin A 828. I'll skip a little bit down here, but you can see all these numbers are better than 100. It's got a huge amount of folate, and it's got vitamin B12. It's even got a fair amount of zinc, and zinc is kind of a limiting nutrient on a vegan diet. Here's a good recipe. It doesn't quite cut the mustard with the RDA arrow. The stuffed bell peppers are a great party dish. And here's the recipe: a pepper, some pilaf, a sprig of parsley, no Red Star yeast this time, so we're short on B12 and calcium and riboflavin and zinc, but it's still a pretty healthy recipe. Our founding president was Elaine French. She invented this, well, she borrowed it actually, but she made it, and it's really delicious. These are kale pinwheels. You can grow kale in any plot of land on Oahu. Use it, take advantage of it. Get a piece of flatbread, a little mustard, steam the kale lightly, turn it into a roll-up, and slice it into these party canapes, and they will be the most nutritious food in your party. There's the nutrient value. With the Red Star yeast, it meets 100% of everything, except it doesn't have any cholesterol. I guess nobody's going to worry about that too much. Here's a perfect snack. This is made out of paste picante sauce, refried beans, Red Star, and whole cucumbers. It looks like this. Very nice party dip, and it meets 100% for everything. This is kind of a complicated recipe. This is chop suey. You can find it online if you are patient enough to put it together, but this takes more than 10 minutes to make, so I don't generally make it. This is what it looks like, and it meets the RDA for everything. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that relatively simple meals give you very good nutrition, no cholesterol, almost no saturated fat, none of the things that make people sick, and they don't cost very much on top of it. The Pink Palace Special is a Georgie's sandwich. It's a raw tomato, an onion, romaine lettuce, pocket bread, parsley, mustard, a little bit of the Red Star, and once again, 100% of the RDA for everything. This one's a little trickier. This is a guacamole dip. And I will tell you right off that the guacamole it's mostly avocado, so it's high fat, and that knocks down your nutrient value. So you have to eat the broccoli florets and the carrots in order to get 100% of the RDA for everything. However, if you don't eat the carrots and the broccoli, you're short on protein and calcium and zinc. Sassy salsa sandwich, pumpernickel bread, vegetarian refried beans, picante salsa, grated carrot, alfalfa sprouts, red star yeast. You just slap it on a couple of pieces of bread and flip it together. You have a nice looking sandwich here. 100% of the RDA for everything. Dick Elgire, the KITV Cook Healthy Fast host, cooked this one up. It's lentil tacos, not very complicated. It looks like this, nice little kind of semi-Mexican dish, very healthy, except he didn't put any Red Star in it, so it's short on B12. And this is a great recipe, rice salad. This is delicious. Jennifer Raymond was one of our speakers, and she left this one with us. Brown rice, salad mix, carrot, black beans, tomato, corn, cilantro, a little piece of avocado. But she didn't put any Red Star in it, so it's short on B12. But it's really good. And you can fix all that by, applying your own Red Star. Okay, here's a good recipe. You get this over at Down to Earth, the tofu tahini dressing. Take some lime juice or apple cider vinegar, a cucumber, a block of tofu, some unhulled sesame seeds. Make sure it's unhulled, because unhulled sesame seeds have 1,100 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams of seed, whereas if you hull the seed and it suddenly becomes kind of white, you've gone down to 400 milligrams of calcium. You need that calcium. It's got a carrot, some garlic, some Red Star yeast, and it makes a great dip or a great dressing for plain old baked potato. And it meets the RDA for everything. Simple stuff, right? I couldn't make it much simpler. Most of those recipes are super simple. And there's nothing proprietary about them. They're not special recipes. Anybody here can go home and, just throw together some green stuff, something that's got some protein in it, like nut or nut butters, and whatever flavors you like to put in, and you will have a balanced diet. Do we have to mention you need to add some Red Star? Okay, so here's our Big Mac attack that we started with. That's what you'll find at all of these fast food joints, and it's deficient in everything on the left of the RDA, as I mentioned before. Okay, now if you want to really get complicated, here's a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. The turkey is a centerpiece of the whole festivity here. Everybody's sitting here waiting for the turkey to get carved up. So I decided to try to save the turkey, and this was a illustration done by a guy named Peter Lind for the Canadian National Broadcasting Company. And I decided that to make a centerpiece, I had to have something that looks kind of brown and dead, like the turkey. So I mixed up kale and tofu and a whole bunch of other stuff over here, and stuck it in a mold, threw it in the oven for about an hour, and came out looking like this. It's pretty tasty, but beware, this is a tricky recipe. Only experienced chefs need to apply. This one meets the RDA for everything once again. Bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, right? Well, this is a tofu, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. Rye bread, tofu, romaine, Red Star, Dijon mustard, slap it together. You got a really nice snack to take to work with you. You should not try to eat the food that everybody else at work is eating, because you will find that your appearance will begin to resemble theirs if you do that. This meets the RDA for everything. Now here's a great recipe. If you can find some Chinese spinach, which is also known as amaranth, and they grow it in the LOI Community Garden. I think you can buy it at various places. Peanut butter, or you could use tahini also. A couple pieces of pumpernickel, some Red Star yeast, tomato, and the amaranth. Throw in as much amaranth as you can, because as we saw in those introductory slides, green leaves are the source of all the organic nutrients required by all the living animals on this planet. Even the lions and tigers are dependent on the photosynthetic leaves, because without those leaves, the herbivores would not exist and the tigers would not be able to eat the herbivores. So this one meets all of the RDAs as usual. Well, to make a long story short, most of the recipes I went through are up here. Chop suey, perfect snack, pink palace, sassy salsa, tacos, V4 juice, and the fast food is over here. And the only one that consistently misses on the RDAs for a whole bunch of things, the fast food. All of these others, you can eat as much or as little of each one as you want, but you will eat until you've had enough to meet your calorie requirements. So if you just eat various amounts of these foods, you don't have to worry about how the nutrient pattern is going to work out because it's automatically taken care of. Every food that you eat meets 100% or more of all the nutrients required in your diet, so automatically, without taking any scales or doing any fancy footwork, you have met your RDAs for everything. Here's a really simple recipe for bread. Just whole wheat flour, some water, egg beater, a silicone bake pad, an oven, and it comes out looking like this. And you peel it off of the silicone mat and you eat it within 10 minutes because after that it turns into concrete. So make sure you eat it fast. Okay, these are the things that are missing from an optimal diet. There's no honey, there's no oil, no salt. You can have all the nuts you want as long as they don't come in a can like this. There's no sugar, none of this wonder what's in it bread. And all of these fake vegan foods up here, they're nice transitional foods. And you know, if you're trying to make a transition to a vegan diet, I think it's a good idea to use these. But don't get the idea that they're really perfect foods. You don't want to mess with those if you can avoid it. Okay, well now I want to go on to the blues. Fatty acids. There's 5 of them in this drawing. 2 of them are essential, the 2 with the can underscore. First one is linoleic acid. That's the first of the omega-6 fatty acids. The second one is alpha-linolenic acid, also ALA. I'm going to use these abbreviations so I won't have to deal with these tongue twisters anymore. Now, the thing about linoleic is that we don't have the enzymes necessary to turn linoleic into ALA. The plants can do it. The green arrow represents what the plants do. The plants kind of use linoleic acid as a storage form of fatty acid. And they don't start making ALA until germination time. So the seeds, whether it's grains, nuts, or seeds, tend to be pretty high in linoleic and very low in alpha-linolenic, which is the one you need. According to my biochemistry textbook, the only known function of linoleic acid is to turn into arachidonic acid, and it doesn't do anything about making these really important fatty acids, namely EPA, docosahexaenoic acid, which is a 25 omega-3, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, which is the really important omega-3. That's the one that is a major player in all the cell membranes in your brain and also in your retina. So it's essential to brain function and also to vision. You want to make sure you get enough of this. Now, ordinarily, one would expect that if you get enough ALA, that you should be able to make the EPA and the DHA. As an interesting sidelight, the DHA can retroconvert to EPA, and that's got some side effects that I'll discuss. Now, my understanding of fatty acids comes from having reviewed this book for the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This is Essential Fatty Acids and Docosahexaenoids from the Third International Congress, sponsored by the American Oil Chemists Society. A salute to Dr. Seth in the background there. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Now, one of the things I took away from reviewing this book was that the ALA ratio in primitive diets and in the human brain is 1 to 1. but it no longer is. So the question is, what happened? Well, the first thing that happened about 12,000 years ago. It was the agricultural revolution. It started off in the Middle East, in this area where we are now trying to get all the last drops of oil. And this guy, Jared Diamond, a physiologist at UCLA, says that the agricultural revolution was the worst mistake in the history of the human race. He says agriculture was bad for health, depended on a few starchy crops. We got cheap calories at the cost of poor nutrition, absolutely. And mostly just wheat, rice, and corn provide most of the calories in our present diet. Agriculture depended on a limited number of crops, so if the one crop failed, we had a famine. And finally, agriculture caused a 16-fold population explosion within 4,000 years, and the result of that was that we got clumped into crowded societies and we started spreading each other's parasites and infectious diseases around. Here's the ag revolution. 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, there was about 5 million people on the whole planet. That would hardly fill up the Hawaiian Islands now. By 6000 BC, there was 86 million. So that was a 16-fold population explosion. And in addition to the other things, it messed up the La'ala ratios. Here's some Egyptians harvesting various grains. So one of the big problems with the ag revolution, we had previously been hunter-gatherers. We didn't regard the land as belonging to us. But after we started growing stuff on that land, it became property to us. So then we started having organized warfare. And here's some Assyrians moving in to take the grains away from the Egyptians using various manly machines of destruction, in this case a Assyrian chariot. Another one of the big problems with agriculture was that it gave us a virtual catalog of infectious diseases. This book called The Beasts of the Earth was not written by a vegetarian. It's a couple of very scientific MDs, and they trace 868 out of 1,415 of all human contagions to our use of domesticated animals. Anthrax from cattle, brucellosis from cattle, BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy from cattle, Campylobacter from chickens, and influenza, we ought to mention that in our current influenza panic. Starts in waterfowls, it can jump into pigs, and then it jumps into us. And all this other stuff comes from abusing animals. Well, the other thing we got out of it was grain, which is grossly unbalanced as a food. It's missing, here's the RDA arrow. This is 19 averaged grains plugged into Nutritionist 4 and 100-gram increments, and it's short vitamin C, B12, vitamin A, vitamin E, calcium, folate, riboflavin. The only thing it's really got going for it is it's super cheap. You can get your entire 2,200 calories for the day for $1.21. A much better bet would be vegetables, because they meet the RDA for everything except vitamin B12. This is 96 averaged vegetables, and you can see they've got tons of vitamin C, and they don't have any cholesterol, of course. But the problem is they cost $11.55 for 2,200 calories, and this is why. You can't store them. You leave fruits and vegetables out for 3 days and they'll be gone. Whereas you can take those grains and stick them into silos and they'll last for 240 days. And that was a big advantage of grains as the basis of the agricultural revolution. They have about 15 times as much La as Allah, but they're really low in both, so they're not much good for either of those fatty acids. And this is what they do to the human back. If you happen to be living 8,000 years ago in Huraya, which is in the Middle East, you might look like this lady. And we found out about her when the archaeologists dug her up and looked at her bones, and she had big spinal defects and knee defects because she was 24/7 down on this little pad trying to pound the grain into insensibility so she could eat it. You cannot eat raw grain. If you try to do it, it'll go in one end and come out the other without any change. You have to do something to it. You have to break it down. And so that's what we've been doing. You have to do big, strange things to make grains edible. Well, what happened again happened in 1900, and this is what happened. The food industry came out with vegetable oil. Now, these are the La-Allah ratios of various vegetable oils. First of all, they're 100% fat, and they're mostly La. The La-Allah ratio of safflower oil is 746. There's virtually no Allah. Cottonseed oil, the stuff they fry your chips in, 181. Corn oil, 46. Soybean oil is getting a little better, 8. Canola is starting to look kind of good. It's down to 2. But the crazy thing is, it's got so much Allah now that the canola growers are trying to GMO it to get rid of the Allah, because the Allah spoils fast and it shortens the shelf life of this valuable product. Olive oil is also 2, and of all the oils that I know of, that's the only one I can give any sort of passive recommendation about. That's got about a 5,500 year track record. The Egyptians started using it 3,500 BC, and it doesn't seem to have gotten any bad press yet. They also started using flaxseed oil, although they called it linseed oil, and they used it for paint, not for food. Here's another piece of very difficult advice, but idealized advice: don't fry foods, whatever you do. You take a perfectly innocent baked potato, and it's got 220 calories. Then you cut it into strips and fry it. It's got 632 calories. And you cut it into chips and fry it, and you got 1,000 calories, plus all of these unpleasant chemicals down here that probably will not make your body happy. The reason people fry foods is because it's quicker. Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, soy oil boils at 300 degrees centigrade approximately, and most cooking oils are very high on La and very low in Allah, and don't try to fry anything or cook anything with flaxseed oil because it oxidizes immediately. Here's the linoleic acid coming in here. It's doing okay as it moves down this chain. It produces gamma-linolenic acid, and that turns into dihomo gamma-linolenic acid, which produces these good guys here. These are more or less neutral eicosanoids. So these are okay, but the next thing happens is the linoleic acid turns into arachidonic acid, which I told you. And the arachidonic acid is the source of what's called the arachidonic acid cascade, which makes almost all of the inflammatory eicosanoids that you see in this little pink box here. You can't read them. I can hardly read them myself, but take my word for it, that stuff is bad for you. The alpha-linolenic acid does much better. It comes down here and turns into EPA, and the EPA produces anti-inflammatory eicosanoids, and it goes farther down, it produces DPA, which is a famous ingredient in fish oil that protects us against heart attack by thinning out the blood. But I should point out to you, it may reduce your risk for heart attack, but it increases your risk for stroke. So you're trading off one disease for another. And finally, we get down to DHA, which is the one we want to get at. And that is why alpha-linolenic acid is the one that you need to get in your diet. You need to get this other one, the linoleic acid, out of it. These are the 5 pillars of inflammation: heat, redness, swelling, pain, loss of function. And these 5 male caryatids are representing each one of those. It's a good thing that we have the ability to have an inflammatory response because it's there for a function. The inflammatory response is the way the immune system of your body takes care of real injuries like a broken bone or a laceration or a really bad trauma. Inflammation is needed then, but when you've got so much linoleic and arachidonic acid in your diet that you are creating inflammation when there's nothing wrong, then you got a problem. And that's exactly what you do when you eat a whole lot of animal food. This is the SR21 database sorted on arachidonic acid. Fish oil, sardine oil, comes in at 1.75 grams per 100 grams, and that's the champ. That's got more arachidonic acid than anything. Spices are the top of the list for plant foods, cloves in this case, 0.04 grams per 100 grams. And the cloves only came in after 1,158 animal foods in the USDA SR21. I don't know whether to talk about this or not. I think everybody knows that trans fats are bad for you. Here's a Crisco ad. Crisco has trans fats to the max. This is from 1912. This lady is dutifully teaching her young daughter how to cook with Crisco so that the daughter's husband will die of a heart attack around 1945. And here's another Crisco ad from 1915. And here's a more recent one. One way to reduce weight. This one suggests that if you can't put a helicopter on your back, you should cook with Crisco to get rid of the weight. The hydrogenation was invented by this guy, Paul Sabatier, and he just figured out a way to turn perfectly healthy cis fats into trans fats, which goes straight across this double bond here. So now the big question has come up, do vegans need DHA supplements? And there's sort of a debate going on here. We've had most of these people come and speak to us. Michael Greger, MD, Joel Furman, MD, both think we ought to take DHA supplements. In fact, Furman is selling them. Jack Norris, who is a very good registered dietitian, who will be speaking to us in a few months, also thinks that we need DHA. The people opposed are Colin Campbell, Jeff Novick, that's John McDougall's nutritionist, Pam Popper, PhD, very intelligent speaker. They don't think it's necessary because they think that if we get enough ALA, we will be able to make our own DHA. And I think that's probably correct. The problem is that we're fighting the food industry. The food industry is trying to stuff us full of law, and the law and the ALA compete with each other for enzymes. So if you're eating a lot of law, you're probably not going to be able to make enough DHA because mostly you're not going to have the stuff that is needed to start with, the ALA. One of the big problems is in deciding whether we need DHA supplements, there are very few clinical labs that can assay serum DHA. I found one called Metametrics. I got 6 fatty acids for $108. I had to pay for them myself. It took Kaiser 2 weeks to find out that if I sent in omega-3s to them or had them draw the omega-3s, they'd send them back to the Mayo Medical Labs. They'd do 29 fatty acids, which is approximately 23 more than I wanted, for $358. Another problem is that all of these proprietary DHAs ultimately come from the Martech company, which uses a hexane solvent extraction process. They get after the algae, they break it up, and then they extract the fatty acids with hexane. And I suppose that if they get all the hexane boiled off, it's perfectly fine. There's an interesting story here. Martech is a spin-off from Martin Marietta. Martin Marietta is a defense contractor, and NASA wanted to send people on long-distance space flights, so they had some of their people work out a food, which turned out to be algae, and then the NASA people canceled the space flights, so those guys that were working on the algae broke off into Martech, and they're making all the DHA now. Here's the USDA SR21 database, all of the plant foods, that is, sorted on ALA. And number 1 is flaxseed oil with 53 grams per 100 grams. Perilla seed. Anybody know what perilla seed is? They also call it shiso. Ring any bells? It's a very nice, crunchy little tiny micrograin. You can get it at Palama Market right next to Don Quixote. It looks like this. And it came on number 2. Flaxseed itself comes in slightly below perilla. And then there's chia seeds, which are also nice and crunchy. And then we have English walnuts. They've got 9 grams per 100. But the problem with them is that they've got more La than they have Allah. And all these top honchos here have got a lot more Allah than La. So the walnuts and nuts in general are a very good source for Allah, but they've got more La than they have Allah. Here are the chia seeds down here. If you don't like the chia seeds, you can get a Brittany planter and she'll grow green hair for you out of the chia seeds. And here are the walnuts down at the bottom. Here are the top Allah sources again. Nuts and seeds come in first, then 97 vegetables. And this is the RDA, assuming you need about 2.4 grams of Allah per day. All these foods are short on it. And this is nuts and seeds without flax. I went back in and checked my database and I hadn't put flax in there. So nuts and seeds are a very good source of Allah. They just happen to also have too much La. But I don't see any way to beat that system. All of the Allah is made by the chloroplasts of green plants. This is a chloroplast. This is a schematic of the Allah. And as I said before, the plants don't start to make this stuff until they germinate. It's not until the seed starts to bud and the photosynthetic processes start that the Allah comes in. There may be a downside to eating too much flax, and I found out about it the hard way. I ate about 2 teaspoons of flax seed in my smoothies every day for about 5 or 6 years, and then I noticed that my skin was starting to bleed really easily, and I was getting these purple spots all over, and I was getting wrinkly skin anyway, so I figured it was just age. This is a pathology slide of atrophic skin, which is what I assumed I had, and this is normal skin here. It's a lot thicker. One day I was bouncing trampoline and wasn't doing anything. I didn't crash. I was just going up in the air, and all of a sudden my left knee blew up, and the entire prepatellar bursa, which is right there, filled up with blood, and I had to get off the trampoline, go over to the clinic and suck out about 50 cc's of blood, and then wrapped it up and went home, and it did it again. So I had to go back and stick a needle in it again, and about the 3rd time I did it, an orthopedist came along and pointed out there was bright red blood and that it wasn't going to stop, and I wound up with this contraption for the next couple of months. It was quite a painful experience. Now, this was an interesting experience I also had. I made a 10-way with a bunch of guys, and I'm the guy with the camera, and I'm closing in on this formation, and I'm closing in too fast. I'm going to run into this guy in the black suit. Not very hard, but it was enough to take all of the epithelium off my right forearm. And when I got down, I was such a bloody mess, I had to have somebody else fold up my parachute for me, because I didn't want to get blood all over the chute. And so then I decided, well, maybe there's something wrong with eating all that flax, because remember, flax elongates into EPA, and EPA is the stuff that prevents you from having a heart attack. So I did a little sleuthing, and I found this letter by a plastic surgeon out in North Dakota who is now taking all of his pre-op facelift ladies off flaxseed because he thinks it makes them bleed too much post-op. There are a couple of other problems with flaxseed that I later found out. 1920s report of flaxseed meal killing trout, and a 2006 report of flaxseed meal causing cancer in chickens. And I'm not trying to tell you not to use flax. I am just suggesting to you that if you are taking a lot of flax and you start to notice these easy bleeding problems, consider cutting back. And in any event, get your DHA tested so you'll know where you are before you go into those DHA supplements. Groover was also taking a baby aspirin, and his pharmacist friend was also taking baby aspirin. Now, aspirin by itself will make you bleed if you get too much of it. But Groover decided that since both he and a pharmacist had similar experiences, it would probably be a good idea to take the ladies off the flax before they got their faces lifted. Before we take questions, I have been told by the boss that I must state conclusions here. So here are the conclusions. All the essential nutrients are made by plants, not animals, so there's no need to eat animals. You can get along perfectly well without it. Balanced vegan food is really simple to fix. I hope you all got that from watching my idiot recipes. If man made it or if it has no fiber, don't eat it. Humans may be short on DHA. That's this stuff down here. It's a 22 carbon, 6 double bond omega-3 fatty acid. And if we are short on it, it's because of two things. The agricultural revolution, 12,000 BC, which put us on a grain-based agriculture that we're still on. And as I pointed out repeatedly, grain is got a lot of la, but it's got almost no Allah. And secondly, the American food industry, which started giving us all these law-rich vegetable oils, which shouldn't have been eaten in the first place. That happened about 1900 AD. So now I will take questions. I saw one back there. Is there any way you can get DHA from natural sources? Is that the question? Okay, yeah, there is. Believe it or not, there's one food that's got a little bit of DHA, and you'd never guess what it was. It's quinoa. You know, the little grain that looks like a baby donut? It's good stuff. It tastes great. But the bad news is it's only got 40 milligrams of DHA per 100 grams of quinoa. So you'd have to eat about a pound of it to get a gram of DHA, and that's the bad news. So I guess that's it, folks. I hope you got something out of it. I'll be around for a while in case anyone wants to ask questions. Thanks very much. You've been a great audience.
Thank you, Dr. Bill. We've got free refreshments from Down to Earth, vegan refreshments, and please come back next month. Aloha.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.